Hello, this is Ms. DB. In this video, we are going to look at how to do some of the problems from the Chapter 12, Section 1 worksheet. This is on reflections. So this is not a very long worksheet, and it won't take you very long to complete. First of all, we're going to learn about transformations in this chapter. So here are the first three that we're going to be working with. Reflection is when you transform a figure across a line. Each point and image will be the same distance from the line of reflection. A rotation is when you spin a figure, rotate a figure about a point. We will be using the origin as the point that we are going to rotate about. Each point and its image are the same distance from the central point. And also translation, that is when all the points of a figure move in the same direction. All of these three different kinds of transformations are called isometries. They do not change the size of the figure. So all three of these, the original figure and the new figure, are exactly the same shape and size. The original figure is called the pre-image. So in this one, the original is A, B, C, D. That's the pre-image. And after it has been transformed, in this case reflected, we would name this A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. And that's called the image. So we have a pre-image and then we have an image. The coordinate points are, so in this first one, this reflection, A was reflected and transformed to A prime. So you use the same capital letters, but you put an apostrophe after it and you read that as prime. And we've talked about transformations a bit before. Way back in Chapter 1, we did some transformations with triangles, and there's some videos in the folder that we go over that, so you can start there. All right, so in the first section of the text, we're just working with reflections, and then there'll be other section 2 and 3 will be on translations and rotations. So to tell whether or not it's a reflection, you need to look and see if there's an invisible line in which you could fold this paper and you would get exactly the same thing on both sides. If that's true, then it's a reflection. So in A, it looks like this figure, this blue figure, was flipped over this line, and then you get the red figure. But in B, it does not look like it's been flipped. It looks like it's just been moved or translated. So for the first few problems, you just have to answer yes or no. But if you say no, say why it's not a reflection. Like, for example, in number 3, I would say no. This figure does not appear to be flipped. It appears to be moved or translated instead. So just yes or no, and there's 2 no's, and you can say why they are not a reflection. Then the next section is how to draw reflections. So if you're drawing by hand, you need a ruler to do these, and you need to do that carefully. You can also make these reflections in Sketchpad. And that might be a good way to do these problems. Remember that in Sketchpad, to use Sketchpad, you have to be logged into the Minnows Virtual Student Desktop. So here's the definition of a reflection. It's a transformation across a line called the line of reflection, so that the line of reflection is the perpendicular bisector of each segment joining each point and its image. This is a very specific definition. We usually say that a reflection has been flipped over a line of reflection. You do need to know that we have a pre-image, which will be named, if it's a point, it's just named with one capital letter, and the image would be that same capital letter with the prime after it. So you would read this as A prime. If it's a figure, like a rectangle or a triangle, then each figure, or each point, each vertex will be named with a capital letter, and after it has been reflected, then it would have the same capital letters but with primes after them. So if this is A, this would be A prime. You can show your reflections with dashed lines instead of solid, or with different colors. Those are good ways. Like our book uses 2 different colors to show the pre-image and its image. Remember, the pre-image is the one with no apostrophes after the capital letters. So you're going to go ahead and graph for 5, 6, 7, and 8, you're going to graph the pre-image and the image with the reflection over each of these axes. So over the y-axis, over the x-axis, over the x-axis, or over the line y equals x. Here's some rules here that will tell you how to do this. If you're going to reflect a point across the x-axis, and you would do this for each vertex of the object, all you do is keep the x coordinate exactly the same and change the sign of the y coordinate. So if it was positive, it changes to negative. If it was negative, it would change to positive. So the x coordinates stay the same, the y coordinates are opposite. That's what this tells you in symbols. To go across the y-axis, to reflect across the y-axis, you leave the y coordinate the same, but the x coordinate will be the opposite. So the opposite of the x coordinate, and then the y coordinates are the same. To reflect across the line y equals x, which is the diagonal line cutting this coordinate system in half this way, you flip the x and y coordinate around. Don't change either of their signs. The x coordinate becomes the y coordinate, and the y coordinate becomes the x coordinate. So you can graph these by hand if you've printed your worksheets out, but again, be careful. You're going to need the pre-image and the image. Label them correctly. Use a ruler to connect your segments. Or you can make these in Sketchpad. You can also make them in Word by going to Insert and then use the drawing tools or the Shapes menu in order to find the line segment and make them that way. It does take a little bit of mouse work to get them all lined up correctly. I'm going to show you how to do one of these problems in Sketchpad. So here's the problems here, and I'm going to do, I'll do number 7. So the rule is for number 7 that to go across the x-axis, to reflect across the x-axis, we will keep the x coordinates the same and change the y coordinates to the opposite. All right, so I'm going to go to Graph, Plot Points, and I'll hide this after I get the problem on here. So my first point is -3, -1. I'm doing number 7. -3 and -1. And I'll plot that point. And you can see it's kind of right on top of here. And then I will do the next point is at 2, 4. And then the last point is at 2, 1. It's going to be a triangle. Once we have all 3 coordinates of my pre-image on here, move that out of my way. Come on. There we go. Now, these 2 points are just, this is the origin and this is to change the scale. So that's not one of the points that I had on here. I'm going to label these points. This one was Q. It automatically does it as A, but I want it to be Q. And the next one was, I have to look back, 2, 4. So that is this point right here. I want that to be R. And then the last point I believe was S. If I'm wrong, just make it be the correct one. And then I'm going to connect these with the line segment tool. Each point. Q to R, R to S, S back to Q. All right, now I am going to reflect this about the x-axis. So to reflect about the x-axis, it might help to remember what these are. So I'm going to measure the coordinates so that they are showing up here. I'm going to change that back to a normal looking font. Arial would be good. And make them smaller. And now I can realize that my Q prime, I leave the X value the same and I change the Y value. So when I graph the next point, I will leave the x value the same at -3 and change the y value to its opposite. The opposite of -1 is +1. So that's where q prime should show up. The opposite for r, you leave the x value the same and use the opposite of the y coordinate. And for s, you leave the x coordinate the same and the y coordinate will be the opposite. So I've got the 3 coordinates of my pre-image up here. I'm going to label them as q prime with an apostrophe after it. And the next one is r prime. Just double click to change the default letter that they're giving you. Oops, I did a wrong symbol there. There we go. And then s prime is this one. And then all I have to do is connect these points with a segment. And I'll be done with this problem. And I'm going to change the color of this one. This is my image after it has been reflected. You can change the color to whatever color you like. Now in Sketchpad, that's just, this was problem 7, to do more of these in Sketchpad without having to attach 4 different things. Remember that you can go to File. Let me move this over so you can see it. You can go to File and then Document Options, and then you can add pages. You can add blank pages or duplicates if you want. You can add as many pages as you want. There's 4 of these to do, so add 4 pages, and then when you can even change the numbers down here if you want. This is number 7. And then you're also going to do the rest of these, and that's it on the worksheet. There's only 8 problems, but these do take a little while to graph them. Thanks very much and have a wonderful day.